Now I'd like to introduce our member, Dave Heller, who has supported ranked choice voting for years and has arranged for this presentation in order to help us unlock these mysteries. And we appreciate Dave and Julia for giving us this opportunity. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. We are planning to post this event on YouTube and or our website for future viewing. Everyone, please mute your microphones unless you're speaking. Take it away, Dave.
Okay, so I became interested in ranked choice voting in 2000 after the situation in Florida, which I'm sure most people here know about. And in 2002, I worked on a campaign in San Francisco where I lived at the time to bring ranked choice voting to that city. I had moved to Berkeley in 2004. We ran a campaign there. I was the campaign coordinator of that campaign. We won that with 72.3% of the vote. I might add, we had a lot of help from the League of Women Voters. And so they were instrumental in getting it passed. And over the years, I've been working on it. I went to Alaska to make it happen there. In 2005, they finally got it last year. And I started an organization called Ranked Choice New York, which Julia Muench and Howie Hawkins are both members of. And I'm going to let Julia explain how ranked choice voting works. And then we'll have time for question and answers. And Julia, Howie, and I will answer any questions that you have. Take it away, Julia.
Thank you, Dave. So I don't have quite as storied of a history with ranked choice voting as Dave does. I first heard about it in 2010 when a friend of mine was running a ranked choice voting campaign for a local jurisdiction in Colorado, and I ended up knocking on doors with him because from the moment I learned about what it was, I knew it was the right choice to help give voters more voice. So greetings, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. As Dave mentioned, I'm just going to give a little bit of a primer, an introduction to what this is and how it works and why it's good, why it's necessary. And then afterwards, we can turn to more of a conversation, question and answer. Unfortunately, I am going to do a slideshow. So while I'm giving the presentation, I won't be able to see you raising your hands. So I will ask you to hold your questions during this introductory presentation. It's only about 10 minutes long. I promise I'm not going to spend this whole time just talking at you. But please feel free to put your questions in the chat so you don't forget them or, just hang on to them. And we'll be sure to get to them all at the end. So let me just share my screen. Oops. Cynthia, can you give me a thumbs up? Am I sharing? Good, okay. What is ranked choice voting? Ranked choice is simply an instant runoff election. It's a simple process where each voter gets to rank their preferred candidates instead of being limited to a single option. This system has been used throughout the United States since the early 1900s. Today, it is being used statewide in Maine and Alaska, as well as many jurisdictions, including New York City. It is also being used nationwide in Australia, Canada, Fiji, Hong Kong, Ireland, New Zealand, Sri Lanka, and many more. Now, our organization is working to get ranked choice voting adopted statewide here in New York, as well as expanding it to other local jurisdictions outside of New York City. So what does ranked choice voting look like? Here we see a sample ranked choice voting ballot. So back in the good old days, when we used to have these meetings in person, the League of Women Voters decided to provide attendees with ice cream. But How do we choose a flavor when there are so many options? Well, it's simple. All attendees just rank their preference. In the end, whichever option has the support of at least half of the attendees wins. So in this example, you can see that I really want chocolate, maybe Rocky Road, but I'm also willing to settle for vanilla. I really don't like mint, and I'm actually allergic to strawberries. So this is how I cast my vote. Once the votes are cast, how do we figure out which option has the support of at least half of the attendees? Well, clearly, if one option has the support of at least half the attendees, that option is the best option. So here we see strawberry wins the day. And as for me, even though I'm allergic to strawberry, at least I see that most of the league wanted strawberry. So I'm okay with it. But what if no option gets at least 50%? So here we see strawberry only got 40% of the vote. Now, under our current system, that still means strawberry would win, and I'd be super disappointed. Who knows if strawberry is actually what a majority of the league wanted? Enter the instant runoff election or ranked choice voting. Remember, my first choice was chocolate, but chocolate got the least number of votes. So all those chocolate votes go to the second choice. My vote goes to my second choice, which was Rocky Road. And it looks like most of the chocolatiers picked Rocky Road as their second choice. But there's still no clear majority. We still have a split of votes, 41% for strawberry, 39% for Rocky Road, 20% for vanilla. So now vanilla has the least number of votes. We'll redistribute these votes to the vanilla second choice. Once again, most of them chose Rocky Road as their second choice. Now we have a clear majority, and so it turns out Rocky Road is the winner, not strawberry, like what we would have thought from the first run. So, and this is good because we can see that a majority of the league actually preferred Rocky Road to all other remaining options. So that's what ranked choice voting is. That's how ranked choice voting works. So why do we need it? And that's simple. We need to prevent spoilers. In our ice cream example, let's say there was no ranked choice voting. I only got to raise my hand for chocolate, and people who preferred vanilla only got to raise their hands for vanilla. Once the votes were counted, it turns out we split the chocolate vote and the vanilla vote, and strawberry won, which is unfortunate because Rocky Road satisfies both chocolate and vanilla needs. It also is a shame for me because I'm allergic to strawberry, and no one would ever have known that I was willing to settle for vanilla. Turning to politics, as Dave already alluded to, there is the infamous case study of Bush v. Gore in Florida. So for those of you who don't remember, weren't born, or were living under a rock in the year 2000, the 2000 presidential election came down to just one state, Florida. Now, without getting into the hanging chads, by the number of votes counted, this is how it broke down. George Bush won with just 48.85% of the vote, and Al Gore came in second with 48.84% of the vote. That's just 0.01%. It came down to 537 votes. But there was also a third candidate that year, Ralph Nader, and he got over 97,000 votes. So what would have happened with ranked choice voting? Well, exit polls showed that if Nader had not been an option, 45% of Nader voters would have voted for Gore. That's about 43,000 votes. Only 27% would have voted for Bush. That's about 26,000 votes. The other 28% wouldn't have voted at all. In sum, Al Gore would have won Florida with over 50% of the vote, a difference of over 17,000 votes. Remember, under our current system, neither candidate had a clear majority, and the margin was only 500 votes. Only after every voter's preference was taken into account did a clear picture emerge on who Florida voters truly wanted in the White House. And before you say to yourself, well, that's very nice for Al, but what about George? Let's talk about the election just 8 years before that, when George Sr. faced a spoiler of his own, Ross Perot, and Bill Clinton took the White House with only 43% of the vote. This is not even close to a clear majority of voters' preferences. And of course, this problem is not reserved for presidential races. There are many, many examples of spoilers in New York elections. To highlight just a few, in 1970, the Conservative Party, William Buckley, represented New York State in the United States Senate after the liberal Republican, Charles Goodell, split the progressive vote with Democrat Richard Ottinger. In 1994, we also had an example where the majority did not win the governorship. George Pataki, a governor, won with only 48.8% of the vote. In that election, there were two spoiler candidates. They earned over 5% of the vote combined. In another example, in 2014, Democrat Mark Panapinto, he won a seat in the New York State Senate with only 32.7% of the vote. There were two third-party candidates. Combined, they earned more votes than the man who took office. So as you can see, the list goes on, even beyond what's briefly shown in these charts. The conclusion, the plurality system, our current system, is the spoiler. First and most obviously, it splits coalitions of like-minded voters amongst many candidates. So in my ice cream example, the chocolate and vanilla votes got split and strawberry ended up winning the day. Second, the splitting of coalitions causes the spoiler effect. Because chocolate and vanilla got any votes, the vote was spoiled for Rocky Road, which could have met both chocolate and vanilla needs. Third, the spoiler effect scares people off from voting their true conscience. In my ice cream example, since I'm actually allergic to strawberry, in our current system, I actually can't risk voting for chocolate at all. So instead, in reality, I would have tried to figure out what the most popular non-strawberry option was and voted for that instead of what I really wanted, which was chocolate. Fourth, as we have seen, our current system fails to guarantee a majority winner, which routinely means that a person with less than a majority support is elected to represent all of us. Fifth, the current system discourages people from running because they're afraid of being a spoiler. In sum, the current system limits our choice and our voice in the voting booth. The solution to all of this is ranked choice voting, where instead of picking just one candidate, ranked choice voting lets you rank multiple candidates in the order you prefer them. Now, this system has multiple proven effects that we've seen for the last 100 years and in jurisdictions all across the country of every size. Ranked choice voting ensures that every elected official has broad voter support, obviously because the elected official must have at least a majority of the votes in order to win. Ranked choice voting is also proven to reduce negative campaigning, lowering the temperature of our politics. This is because every candidate will be running to be your second choice, not just your first choice. So they don't want to alienate you by completely attacking your first choice candidate. For example, in San Francisco, candidates now routinely cross-endorse each other for the same position. Ranked choice voting also simplifies runoff elections, reducing election costs and only making voters go to the polls once. So take the recent Georgia runoff for Senate. Although Georgia has a system that does guarantee that elected officials have a majority support, it does so at the expense of running a second election at huge cost to the state and allowing another opportunity for big donors to give big contributions. Meanwhile, everyday voters have to show up to two separate elections, which has proven to cause a huge drop in voter turnout between the general and the runoff. And speaking of voter turnout, ranked choice voting is proven to increase voter turnout. First, it enables broader voter participation, giving voters more voice to express their top choice. It also empowers military and overseas voters. So when I served in the United States Peace Corps, I experienced firsthand the disheartening feeling of knowing that your vote wouldn't even be counted until long after the results were announced, With ranked choice voting, all of my preferences would have to be taken into account. In fact, Illinois, South Carolina, Louisiana, and other states already use ranked choice voting in order to count their overseas citizens' preferences. Ranked choice voting also empowers women and people of color, both as voters and as candidates. While a voter's top choice may be female or a person of color, our current system forces every voter to ask really uncomfortable questions like, but is our town really ready for a female mayor? Or, but will other people here really vote for a person of color as their governor? With ranked choice voting, no voter will ever have to ask themselves that question again. And this has proven effects. In the jurisdictions that have enacted ranked choice voting, representation for persons of color increased by nearly 20%. In that same period, areas that did not adopt ranked choice voting only increased 3%. Likewise, before ranked choice voting, women only made up a quarter of representatives on city council. But those same jurisdictions chose women 50% of the time after adopting ranked choice voting. As another example, in Oakland, California, their very first female mayor was elected after they adopted ranked choice voting in 2010, and a woman has served as their mayor ever since. In sum, ranked choice voting more fairly represents the full spectrum of voters, and this has a natural effect on voter turnout. Because ranked choice voting empowers voters with greater choices in the voting booth, it dramatically improves voter turnout. It is for all of these reasons that we support ranked choice voting as a real practical solution. It eliminates spoilers and vote splitting. It encourages more people to run. It curbs negative campaigning, and it gives voters more choice and more voice. So thank you very much for your attention during that little introductory spiel. You can scan this code right here with your phone, and that will bring you right away to our website and social media pages. I'm also going to post a sign-up sheet to the chat. For anyone who's interested in contributing to our efforts on behalf of New York voters, whether that's by volunteering or donating or both. And we're going to move from there into question and answer. So since we do have so many people on the call, I will ask people to raise their hands. I'll also look to the chat to see if anyone's raised any questions in there. And if we have enough time after we've addressed everyone's questions sort of one by one, then we'll try to move into a more free-flowing discussion about the pros and cons of ranked choice voting. So thank you all very much. Oh, the button is over there. There we go. So again, I'm just posting to the chat the sign-up sheet. So it looks like we have a question from Karen.
Yeah, I got to leave in a little bit. I have two comments. Well, my first comment 0 is that's the clearest explanation of RCV that I've seen. And I think a lot of people, you know, I thought that was great because a lot of times it's not put forward with examples like that. So my first comment is, I object. There's no way chocolate would be the fourth choice. I object, and not in this world. You have to make it more realistic. I got more seriously, one of the reasons why I'm attracted to the idea is the ranked choice vote, or the current system we have, really locks in a two-party system. It goes to the spoiler effect. Nobody wants to even, not nobody, but it's really inhibiting of a third or alternative parties to because of the spoiler effect. And you know, I've been wanting to say, hey, you got to be realistic. We don't have RCV. You got to vote for this candidate, even though I've advised people not to vote their conscience, just because it can be very bad. It's really a dilemma. And so people can not only vote their conscience, but we can organize in an alternative manner and not be locked into the two-party system. And
Thank you.
that's it.
Thank you very much, Karen. I really appreciate your comments and absolutely empowering a more diverse array of candidates is a huge benefit of ranked choice voting.
Karen, that phenomenon you just mentioned, where plurality voting leads to a two-party system, is called Duverger's law. He was a French political scientist who came up with basically kind of a mathematical theory as to why that happens. Just so you know, there's an actual name for it.
Okay.
It looks like we have another question from Tricia.
Yes, hi there. So I am in the village of New Paltz, and I'm on the New Paltz Democratic Committee, and we adopted ranked choice voting last year and wrote it into our bylaws so that when we do endorsements for candidates, it's a more fair representation of our choices. And we've used opavote.com to do that for free. And I just recently got it written into the Ulster County Democratic Committee bylaws as well. And so we use that for endorsements. We're up again, and I have people on the village board of New Paltz who would love to do ranked choice voting. The trouble is that we don't have a charter. And so we can't easily write an amendment to the town charter to adopt ranked choice voting. So if you have any pointers for me as to what my next move can be to get it implemented locally here in New Paltz.
Well, I mean,
That is definitely, Howie and I both serve on the policy and research section of ranked choice voting, and that is right at the top of our list. And I will make sure that you are the first person who receives our report on that.
Okay.
So this is the city of New Paltz's charter?
It's the town of New Paltz, yes.
Town of New Paltz, okay.
And
So obviously,
we don't have a town charter.
You don't have a town charter, okay.
No. And most of the towns in Ulster County doesn't have a town charter. It doesn't allow us to easily amend anything.
Right. But your local elections for your towns, for the town of New Paltz, you've decided to use ranked choice voting going forward.
No, we can't.
Okay, I see.
So we can't start the process of putting a piece of legislation into the town charter, which we don't have, to say we would, we would be open to ranked choice voting.
I think that Ulster County is a chartered county. There are 13 counties in the state that are chartered, and chartered counties can adopt ranked choice voting.
Oh.
Nice.
We
So
do have
how-
a county charter, and when we're familiar with working with that charter. So that's something that can be done.
So how would I go about getting it on the county charter?
You have to speak
To the county ledge?
Yes, it's all the county legislature. And then it will have to be a public referendum, which I'm sure that, well, I'm not sure, but with good support, people are interested.
And
Okay.
one of the goals of Ranked Choice NY, of course, will be to support you through that process, to provide you things like pamphlets to distribute to voters, so that when it comes time to pass legislation like that, we'll have pamphlets and documents ready to hand you, so that you can get that education campaign out there.
Okay, that's great. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Kevin Freeman, on a related note, asked in the chat, how do we make this happen locally and statewide? The number one thing you can do is sign up on that Google Doc that I shared in the chat and join up with Ranked Choice New York. We are going to be advocating both in chartered communities as well as statewide. So Tricia, that sort of gets back to your question about what do we do in the town of New Paltz where we don't have a charter? Well, put pressure on your chartered entity. If your county is chartered, that's certainly who Ranked Choice New York will be targeting, to make sure that, not only are we pushing the state legislature to make this move, to make this happen statewide, but we're also going to be supporting local jurisdictions and making this transition on a piecemeal basis, whenever each jurisdiction is ready to do that. And so that obviously will help put pressure on the state to adopt it statewide once they see how much support is in all these different chartered communities. But more importantly, we want to make sure that as many voters have access to this voting method as soon as possible. So we're going to be making sure to provide you with that kind of support, both on the local level and the advocacy on the state level.
Okay. Can you put the link to sign up in the chat again? I don't see it listed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
We have people here from Dutchess County, and Dutchess County also has a charter, so they can get to work on their legislature to support that.
Great, wonderful.
Yep.
I've actually
County legislation elections, so it's a good time to put pressure.
Nice, there you go.
I've spoken to the Dutchess County legislators several times on ranked choice voting, so they all know about it, and they've actually passed. Well, some of the legislators voted to pass a resolution supporting ranked choice voting.
So what are some of the pitfalls of ranked choice? There's fear that it's complicated. I don't know. I mean, outside of the charter issues, is there any other?
Well, so some of the pitfalls, one that's specific to New York State is the issue of fusion voting. So that's a ballot design issue that we're going to have to address ultimately. But we've had ballots in New York State. So New York State used to have ranked choice voting in like the 1930s. New York City had ranked choice voting, and they handled it just fine. So I imagine we can do it too.
Well, I just went through all of the league's positions, and they do support fusion voting.
Yeah, we're not looking to get rid of fusion voting.
Okay.
But there's a way to do both. There's definitely.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah.
It just, might be complicated on the ballot.
Yeah. So the fusion design, the ballot design is a question. So that's one pitfall. How you had a finger raised, but you're on mute.
Yeah, New York City had 5 elections using ranked choice voting. And it was multi-winner ranked choice voting. So each borough elected a whole slate of candidates, which meant they got a multi-party system. They had 5 to 7 parties elected each of those elections. And what they did for fusion was, instead of a separate ballot line for each party with the candidate appearing over and over, they had one line for the candidate and then the parties that nominated them on that same line. So some people ran with one party, some ran with 2 or 3, some ran as independents with no label there. And Yonkers did that in the same period, and so did Long Beach. And so far we talked about electing people from single member districts, but you can also elect them from multi-member districts. And then 2 things happen is you get legislative bodies that are multi-party, and gerrymandering becomes much less of an issue, because where you draw the lines doesn't matter so much when you're electing a whole lot of candidates from one district. So it's harder to bias the district lines politically. And I know gerrymandering is a big issue coming up now after the census, but multi-winner RCV for legislative bodies kind of neutralizes that problem.
Yeah. So, absolutely. Thank you, Howie. So there's, so the point is, I think that it's proven that we can address this fusion issue as the, as well as having ranked choice voting lines. Like I said, and like Howie was just saying, we did it in the 30s, we've done it in Long Beach, we've done it in Yonkers, so we can do it again. It looks like Laura Foreman has a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Um, Actually, to Tricia, your question came up this afternoon at a Let New York Vote meeting by one of your coworkers in New Paltz. We didn't come up with an answer though. Nobody was able to answer her. So I'm glad you got your answer today. My understanding from being active with Let New York Vote is that we're going to have the biggest problem with the state board. And I don't know how we overcome them.
The State Board of Elections.
Yeah.
Yeah, so New York City, obviously New York City, when they performed their legal analysis, came to the conclusion that any chartered entity in New York State is allowed to pass ranked choice voting. There's some indications that the state board might be coming to a different legal conclusion, but they haven't done anything about that different conclusion. In fact, they provided the borough of Queens in New York City just had a special election, and the Board of Elections provided them support for that special election with ranked choice voting for free. So they haven't, not only have they not challenged New York City's ranked choice voting choice to pass that, but they're also actually providing support for that and facilitating the process of making that transition. So we are hopeful that the State Board of Electors are going to continue to respect that. And like I mentioned, our team is continuing to do the legal research that's necessary so that if a state board ever asks you that question, you're ready with an answer that we've helped you develop.
Also, Douglas Kellner, who's one of the chairpersons of the board of the State Board of Elections, is a ranked choice voting advocate. So we have a friend on the commission.
Excellent. Howie?
Yeah, I happened to listen to the last State Board of Elections meeting. And the issue with New York City, and this was raised by the Republican who was chairing, was that New York City had in state law a runoff system. So if nobody gets over 40%, then they have a second runoff election. And ranked choice voting solved that, but it didn't change state law. So some of these commissioners were like saying, we're getting preempted. On the other hand, they did authorize the use of an open source tabulation system for the runoff, the ranked choice voting primaries and special elections going forward. So Kellner's a friend. I'm not sure the Republican chair is, but that's the state of the debate as far as I can tell.
Cindy, one of the things that you had talked about was, you asked about was problems with ranked choice voting. One of the things that people will point to is that sometimes if people don't rank their ballots, if they just put their first choice and they don't rank a second or third, their vote can get eliminated. And then the final tally, because when votes get eliminated, there's a new majority line, which can be less then somebody who wins the final round might have less than the majority of the original voters. And people will point to that, like, ranked choice voting doesn't always guarantee a majority, but it's still better than electing somebody with 25% of the vote. And runoff elections almost always have less voters than the November election, the general election. So, in reality, like, it's still better than doing a runoff election. It's cheaper. There's more turnout. The other thing that can happen, which there's never been an actual example of it, is if you have 3 candidates running and 2 candidates get an equal minority, and then you have to flip a coin as to who gets eliminated, because if one candidate has 75 votes and 2 other candidates have 50 votes, one of the 50 vote people has to get eliminated. And so you flip a coin and you can get 2 different outcomes based on who gets eliminated. But that's never happened. It's theoretical. And so, there is no perfect voting system, but ranked choice voting is pretty much the Rolls Royce of the lot.
It looks, it almost looks like a no-brainer, but who's against this?
Well, people who are resistant to change, people who, when you start talking about percentages and number shifting and things like that, their eyes just kind of naturally glaze over because math. So, we just have to be careful about, how we present things. People who think that you're doing this to protect one partisan side over another partisan side, which, as you've seen from our many examples, simply isn't the case. It's been proven to benefit every corner of our democracy, as well as people who are currently in power. People who are benefiting from the current system, quite frankly. Even though spoilers have been proven to happen to every political party, the people who are currently in power will resist changing the system in any way. So this is why grassroots is important.
And my experience, having run several campaigns, is the biggest resistance comes not just from candidates who are used to running a plurality campaign, but also campaign managers who, they've gotten used to mudslinging. And, with ranked choice voting campaigns, like quite literally in San Francisco and in Berkeley, Oakland, candidates co-endorse one another. So I might say, vote for me first, vote for Cindy second. And then Cindy says, vote for me first, vote for Dave second, right? That actually happens where candidates co-endorse one another.
Cat in the Hat.
They have similar
Big red dog. Clifford.
Yeah. And so the resistance comes from people who like to mudsling because it's easy to do. But mudslinging in a ranked choice voting campaign is suicide because you're not just trying to get first choice votes, you're trying to get second and third choice votes. That's how you win. And candidates quickly realize that in the Bay Area, and it's completely changed the dynamics of campaigning. And
that's a good one.
It makes voter turnout better. It's win-win-win-win for everybody.
Well, I can tell you as an election inspector for some time now, people, if they see words You know, it's hard on them. And when we switched over to the electronic, you know, actually it was pretty well received. But you know, there's still a paper ballot, and people still have trouble reading. I mean, more people than you would think have problems reading those things. So that's really, you know, the only real downside that I can see.
But I will say that in jurisdictions that have adopted ranked choice voting, they have found like 87% of voters vote like ranked multiple candidates. So they didn't just they actually learned how the process worked, and they did it, and you know they chose second options and even third options.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be an educational thing for the people who are running the polls.
Yeah.
You know, so that they can explain that in a positive and you know, simple manner how you get it done.
Yeah. And it does end up being straightforward, like I think Karen was saying to begin with. I'm sorry, Howie. I know you keep raising your hand there. Go ahead.
Well, I think the resistance comes from mainly incumbent politicians. Historically, when ranked choice voting was adopted in the progressive era up to World War II, it was a coalition of good government groups, like in New York City, the Citizens Union, Republicans who tended to be excluded because plurality voting overrepresents the majority. So you maybe get, you know, across the city, 60% of the votes, but you get 90 or 100% of the seats. That was what was going on in New York City. And then Republicans were in on the coalition, and so were left-wing parties like the Socialists and the American Labor Party. So they pushed it through, and the machine pulled it back after World War II. And two things were going on. Black people were getting elected in these cities, and you know, that was mobilized against. And then in New York City, 2 communists got elected, but that was used all across the country. So that was in the McCarthy era, when a lot of these systems were repealed. Now today in New York City, the resistance you're getting is from incumbent politicians, and leading the charge were Black incumbents, but they're in safe gerrymandered districts. And they say ranked choice voting would not be good for Black and Latino politicians. But the truth is, the first Black politician elected to the New York City Council was Adam Clayton Powell Jr. under proportional representation or multi-winner ranked choice voting, running as a third party candidate, the American Labor Party. So I think the resistance comes from the politicians who got elected under the current system. And there was a New York Times editorial after the first proportional representation, multi-winner ranked choice voting election in New York City. And the New York Times editorial board noted that the Republicans are whining that they got 2/3 of the votes and only 2/3 of the seats, whereas before they had all the seats or all but one of the seats. And the New York Times said, no, that's proof that this system is fair, even if the machine was still strong. So anyway, my point is the incumbent politicians, some of them are gonna, you know, just defend the system because that's how they got elected.
So Gaia asked, do you have an ideal timeline for getting New York State on board with ranked choice voting? Are we talking years or decades? We are definitely not thinking decades. We are thinking in terms of years. We're hoping that with the momentum of New York City's support, which is obviously a big step, we'll be able to support other local jurisdictions like New Paltz or Ulster County and other charter jurisdictions throughout New York State, you know, supporting them in their efforts to adopt ranked choice voting on the local level in the coming year or two. And, you know, obviously, ideally, New York State as a state entire will have definitely adopted it by 2024. But if you want to ask me about idealism, like, let's talk about 2022, you know, so. But yeah, you know, those are more the timeframes that I think we are thinking. We also have a question from Gina. Doesn't ranked choice voting also mean a potential reduction in the costs of campaigns? Saving costs also means someone is making less. So, you know, there's a pro for voters and a cost, maybe why someone would oppose it. Dave or Howie, do you want to address the question of costs?
Well, certainly where you have runoff campaigns, it's a major cost saver because the election, you don't have to run a December runoff. And the other thing too, which you mentioned earlier with the Georgia example, you get a reset on campaign finance, donating to campaigns. And so many times, like in San Francisco, mayoral candidates would get another bucket loads of money coming into their campaigns for December runoff, which is one of those things that I think pretty much everybody is against. So it does. It makes trying to get by influence a lot harder.
I have another question for you, Dave, from Maura. She was wondering how the League of Women Voters provided support during the campaign in California, whether it was with public education. I'm pretty sure, and Howie might know the answer to this, but I'm pretty sure I read that the League of Women Voters in New York City testified before the hearing in support of ranked choice voting before it was adopted in New York City. So, Dave, if you could address California, and then Howie, if you could address New York City.
Well, I was part of an organization called Californians for Electoral Reform, and we had members of the league. One of the board members was one of the board members on CFER, Californians for Electoral Reform. And with the local campaigns, it was the local leagues that were offered support to us. So particularly in Berkeley, like we had meetings at the president's, the local president's house. We had their victory party at her house. They gave us their mailing lists, all that stuff. So they were instrumental. And plus, just having the endorsed by the League of Women Voters is a big positive. So just being able to put that on your literature is a big help.
Speaking of mailing lists, I realized that when I was posting it before, I was accidentally still direct messaging to Maura. So I did finally post that sign up sheet, and I'm posting it again just now. Howie, New York City?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the League of Women Voters did. I've looked at the testimony, but I was involved in getting Greens to testify because our problem was what was proposed is not being used in the general election, which excludes us. And we were advocating, like New York City used to have, multi-winner districts for proportional representation. So you get a multi-party system on the council. Probably more Greens will be elected from single member districts if we do have ranked choice voting. But it'll be a lot tougher because most of these districts, are going to be majority Democratic in New York City and a few Republican, and it'll be tough for us. Whereas, if we're a 20% party, we should get 20% of the seats instead of none. That would be fair and equal representation, proportional representation. So I know the Greens testified to the Charter Commission. I don't recall seeing what the league said. So I just don't know.
Okay, well, I will double check on that, and I will give that answer to Cynthia.
They did, the LWV of Suffolk did support it. And I haven't checked for New York City, but I'm pretty sure they did as well. We don't have a state position about it yet.
Yet,
right. That's another way the League of Women Voters Hudson Valley can help us.
I might add that there is federal legislation that's it's been put up for many sessions of Congress. There's the Fair Representation Act, which has been sponsored by Don Beyer of Virginia, and the Ranked Choice Voting Act, which I think is co-sponsored by Ro Khanna from the Bay Area. And so those are two bills that are, they put up every session of Congress. They, I follow them and they never make it out of committee. But Ilhan Omar, who is from Minnesota, Minneapolis, where they use ranked choice voting in Minneapolis. So she is, I saw her, just happened to be watching TV the other day, and the host asked her about ranked choice voting, and she talked about it for like 2 or 3 minutes, and said that she's going to be sponsoring legislation. So, you can talk to Antonio Delgado, who's Ulster County's congressperson. I've been honey badgering him, so he's well aware of what ranked choice voting is by this time, and so we could get it on the federal level too. That would be great. And the Fair Representation Act is a multi-seat version of ranked choice voting that Howie was just talking about.
Yeah, I would just add that this omnibus voting rights, campaign finance, and campaign ethics bill called HR 1 has a clause on the voting rights section that says all new voting equipment, machine systems have to be compatible with ranked choice voting. So it's a long bill with, good and bad parts, but that part's good from my point of view.
Very cool. So we have a question from Kate. She was wondering if RCV elections have ever been contested, like if the actual vote count itself was contested, and if so, is the vote verification process the same or any different? If either of you have ever seen a vote recount for ranked choice voting.
San Francisco, Berkeley, and Alameda County both do. But they're required by law to do. They basically draw lots, and they do a count of. They pick a certain percentage of precincts. I think, I forget how many. It's like 2 or 5% of the precincts. They draw lots, and then they hand count them, and they compare them to what the machine count was. And if there's any difference, then they hand count the whole city. As far as I know, there's never been a contested ranked choice voting election.
But historically, they've used paper ballots, so you had a paper trail.
Yes.
And could recount.
Yeah.
Like when New York City, back in the 30s and 40s, they still used lever machines for the other elections. And then everybody, after they went to the lever machines and did those votes, they'd get a paper ballot to do their ranked choice voting for city councilors. So they had that paper trail if they needed.
I miss the lever machines. I don't know about y'all, but they were like, they gave some officialdom to the whole thing. Hey, Susanna, do you think you could mute your mic? I'll see if I can mute it for her. I think I can. Yep, there we go. Susanna, feel free to unmute if you want to chime in. I'm sorry, I just muted you there.
Yeah, California requires paper ballots. The whole state.
New York State does as well.
Paula Lee just chimed in. She said the League of Women Voters national position supports proportional representation, which means every league can use the position. Albany, California just passed the multi-winner version of ranked choice voting to achieve proportionate representation with over 74% of the vote. And the League of Women Voters did assist in adopting that, or getting that adopted, I should say.
Yeah, they're Berkeley's neighbor. In fact, they used to be part of the city of Berkeley, and it broke off, 100 years ago. But they have the example of Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, San Leandro, and that's the first use of multi-seat district ranked choice voting in the state. So that's a positive development. Up in Humboldt County, they also passed ranked choice voting up there. And I think the state is about due, the whole state to go ranked choice voting. That was our goal when in 2000, when I was on the board in 2005, our goal was to get it for the state in 20 years. So we're getting close. Or they're getting close. I don't live there anymore.
Kathy O'Connor just asked about efforts to get this, to introduce this concept in school systems. I will say that over 85 colleges and universities across the United States already use ranked choice voting. So it's certainly not alien at the university level. I don't know if, Howie, you're more familiar than I am with how school district elections work. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure whether we could get that adopted on the school district level here in New York.
Well, I don't see why not. It'd be like councils. They're doing it in Albany, California. They've done it in Cambridge, Massachusetts, along with the city council, now for about 100 years. New York City used to have neighborhood, 3-member neighborhood school boards, and they were elected by ranked choice voting until they went to mayoral control and just wiped those out. So I don't see why we couldn't do it for school boards. In fact, I think it would be a good idea.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for raising that, Kathy. That would be another really great way to spread the word and to make sure that as many people have access to this level of choice as possible.
Certainly, I think one of the schools in Poughkeepsie, their student government uses ranked choice voting to elect their.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's something that certainly you don't need a city charter or anything. Schools can, student bodies can just do that. So
that's another really great idea for public outreach. Trisha.
So we had tried to do it for the school board election because we're shifting our school board election to be the same time as the regular election. But they use the same voting machines. And it's the Dominion Image Cast voting machine, which doesn't have ranked choice voting. And
so we need to get our tech team to write angry letters to Dominion.
So Dominion does have a machine that that does ranked choice voting. I forgot the name of what it is. But I don't know if it's certified by the State Board of Election.
I see. Okay.
So.
Well, that will certainly be something that will be unraveled as New York City moves forward. Obviously, they just had that small election in Queens, that small special election, but the Democratic primary is June 22nd. And obviously that's, that's going to be huge for New York City. Usually the Democratic primary decides the,
So I think that it would have to be certified in order for them to use it in the mayoral election.
surely. So I do, yeah, I would imagine, the State Board of Elections and New York City are going to work out what machines are going to be used by then, because we're going to have 10 million people voting for mayor.
Yes. I'm excited to see how what the outcome of that's gonna be based on the ranked choice voting.
Likewise. I mean, obviously ranked choice New York, we are.
Yeah, you're heavily invested.
July.
So friends and family in the city have been saying that it's the tone of the election has been very healthy. So candidates are not going after each other. They're having productive conversations around actual policy stance as opposed to mudslinging, name calling.
In the early days of passing ranked choice voting, machines were a big issue. Berkeley at the time had Diebold machines, and San Francisco had ES&S, and as other cities started passing it, and the counties were, even counties that didn't have ranked choice voting, anticipating getting it, because buying all that equipment and software is a big sale. Then they didn't want to have to rebuy after, if a city passed ranked choice voting. So most counties, when they did their RFPs, included the capability to do ranked choice voting. And so most all companies now, because now you have the whole state of Maine, you have Santa Fe, New Mexico, there's cities in Colorado, Minnesota. There's cities all over now that are adopting ranked choice voting. So pretty much all the companies have equipment that will do ranked choice voting. It might require a software upgrade, but pretty much I think they all pretty much have that capability now.
We have any more questions, comments? We're good? Julia?
I mean, I'm good. This has been a wonderful conversation, and it's given me a lot of really great ideas to bring back to the organization. So I really appreciate everyone's active participation and thoughts this evening. This has really been wonderful. I will post our sign-up sheet one more time. Feel free to sign up. That gives you the pathway to sign up for volunteering and/or for donating. So feel free to check this out.
Yeah, that it was fabulous. A great presentation. I hope you use it a lot. We'll certainly have it out there. Well done. I'd like to know how you got involved here with ranked choice.
How I got involved. So I have been a member of Represent Us for quite some time, which is a nonpartisan nationwide advocacy organization that advocates against gerrymandering and for fair voting policies and stuff like that. And they shot me a message and let me know that this group was starting to organize. And I have been pounding the desk about ranked choice voting for years. And so I said yes. And as soon as I signed on, the Ranked Choice New York team said, well, we more of you, please come
Well
on.
done. Well done. Well, I'd like to thank Dave and Julia and Howie and Trisha, who had to leave, for a really, really informative. It was just what the doctor ordered, and I appreciate your time and your effort. And, we will see you again, I'm sure.
Thanks for doing this, Cynthia.
You are welcome,
Thank
Dave.
you.
Take care.
Thanks
Bye,
so much,
everybody. So nice
everyone.
to meet you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.